Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're gonna be diving into a theory that's pretty wild, I gotta say.
Yeah, this one is out there.
It's the idea that descendants of, well, biblical giants, like the Nephilim,
Netflix.
are secretly controlling the world.
Yeah, we'll be looking at a YouTube video from Now You See TV. It's called Genesis 6 Conspiracy. Nephilim Giants Plan to Enslave Mankind, Book of Enoch.
Catchy title, huh?
Definitely grabs your attention. And it makes some pretty big claims about how these Nephilim are manipulating like governments and financial systems and all sorts of stuff.
It's like a real deep dive into conspiracy theories,
Oh yeah, for sure.
The main speaker in the video, Gary Wayne, even wrote a whole book about it. It's called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy.
Yeah, he really dives deep into this stuff.
So how do we even begin to unpack this whole thing?
Well, he starts with Genesis 6.4, you know, that biblical passage that mentions the sons of God, the Nephilim, and the Gibborim.
Okay, yeah, I vaguely remember that one.
Well, he believes that those terms are actually referring to fallen angels, their giant offspring, and then like powerful rulers who are often seen as evil.
So he's taking a pretty literal interpretation of that verse, huh?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
He uses that as the foundation for his entire theory. He's arguing that this verse isn't just some random story, but it's like a clue to like this hidden history that's still playing out today.
So it's like a secret code he's trying to decipher?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting is how he connects these biblical giants to similar figures in other cultures' mythologies.
Right, like the Titans in Greek mythology.
Yeah, exactly, the Titans. And then the Anunnaki and Sumerian tales, and I know there are tons of other examples of these larger-than-life beings in different cultures.
It really makes you wonder if there's some kind of shared origin or like inspiration behind all these stories.
Yeah, it's a pretty compelling thought. And the video specifically mentions the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a Mesopotamian flood narrative that actually predates the Bible.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's this giant survivor named Gilgamesh, obviously. But what's really interesting is that the story is being told by another giant.
Whoa, that's pretty wild. Like, the giants have their own version of history.
Right. And that's a key part of Wayne's theory. He thinks there's this hidden history that has been deliberately obscured by the people in power, you know?
Like they're trying to keep us in the dark about something.
Exactly.
Speaking of power, the video goes on to claim that the Nephilim and their descendants have this, like, long-term plan to basically enslave humanity. That's a pretty bold statement. How does he even back that up?
So he argues that this plan started way back in prehistory with a rebellion against God. And this rebellion, this cosmic power struggle, led to the first apocalypse, the Great Flood.
Hold on, so he's saying that even the flood was part of their plan.
According to Wayne, yeah. He sees it as this strategic move by these powerful forces to wipe out humanity and then start fresh with their own chosen lineage.
Wow, okay, so the story doesn't end there, right? What happened after the flood?
Well, he argues that the rebellion continued after the flood. He uses the Tower of Babel as like a prime example of this ongoing defiance against God.
This is starting to sound like a pretty intricate conspiracy theory. He's saying that these Nephilim descendants are still around today, just like pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's his basic premise.
But how do they even blend in? Like, they'd have to be pretty good at hiding, right?
He addresses that. He suggests that their bloodlines have become more diluted over time, so they maybe don't look so giant-like anymore. But he also brings up the idea that they might have shape-shifting abilities to help them blend in.
Shape-shifting. Okay, now we're getting into some really wild territory. I'm curious to hear more about how he connects all of this to, like, modern-day power structures.
Well, that's where secret societies come into play.
Ah, yes, the classic conspiracy theory element. Which ones does he talk about?
You know, the usual suspects, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and of course the Illuminati. He claims that they're all carrying forward this Nephilim agenda, manipulating world events, controlling financial systems, and shaping our culture to ultimately establish a one-world government and pave the way for the rise of the Antichrist.
So he's painting a picture of this, like, the super powerful and coordinated network operating in the shadows. But what's the evidence? Like, does he actually provide any concrete proof to back up these claims?
He does dive into some specific examples later on, but for now, he's setting the stage for this grand conspiracy. He's making the case that all these seemingly unrelated groups are actually interconnected and working towards the same sinister goal.
Okay, so he's established this overarching narrative of a Nephilim conspiracy that stretches from like biblical times all the way to the present day. It's definitely intriguing, but I'm also, a little skeptical.
I think that's a healthy approach to take with any conspiracy theory. Keep an open mind, but also critically evaluate the evidence and the arguments.
Exactly. So where do we go from here? What's next in this deep dive?
Well, Wayne starts to get more specific about how this alleged Nephilim agenda is playing out in the modern world. He talks about bloodlines, secret societies, and even like the manipulation of pop culture.
Oh, okay. Sounds like things are about to get even more interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about secret societies, like actually manipulating world events and even shaping our culture. How does that even work? Are we talking like subliminal messages in movies and stuff?
Well, that is one of the things that Wayne talks about. He points to symbolism and imagery that's found everywhere, like corporate logos and holiday traditions and all sorts of things like that. But he also argues that these groups, these secret societies, are using more like traditional methods of control as well.
Okay, so what, like controlling the media?
Yeah, like controlling the media, influencing education, even using fear and propaganda to like shape public opinion.
It's kind of like he's saying everything we see and hear is part of some big plan. It's a little overwhelming if you really think about it.
Yeah, I could see how it would feel that way. It's definitely a very pervasive and kind of insidious system of control that he's describing. But, it's important to remember that this is just one interpretation of events.
Right, right. So who are the masterminds behind all of this? Does he, name names?
He does. He talks about organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberg Group, the Trilateral Commission. He also talks about powerful families, particularly in the banking world.
Okay, yeah, those names ring a bell. I've definitely heard them mentioned in, other conspiracy theories. But what's the connection to the whole Nephilim agenda?
Well, Wayne argues that these groups and families are actually descended from those original Nephilim bloodlines, and they're carrying forward their ancestors' mission to, dominate the world.
So just because they're rich and powerful, that means they're Nephilim descendants?
Well, he often points to their wealth, their influence, their interconnectedness, all of that as kind of proof of their involvement. And he even suggests that they're using issues like overpopulation and environmentalism as tools to advance their agenda.
So is he saying that things like climate change are just a hoax made up by these groups?
Not necessarily. He seems to acknowledge that these issues exist, but he argues that they're being exploited and exaggerated to manipulate public opinion.
So using fear to create a sense of urgency and then justify these drastic measures that ultimately, give them more power.
Exactly. It's that classic problem, reaction, solution strategy. Create the problem, get people to react with fear and demand a solution, and then offer yourself as the savior with the answer that they've been, primed to accept.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's talk about those banking families for a second. He specifically mentions the Rothschilds, right? What's their role in all of this?
He claims that the Rothschilds were originally hired by these elite bloodlines to manage their finances, and that they've basically been instrumental in funding and directing this whole Nephilim agenda for centuries.
It seems like the Rothschilds are always popping up in these conspiracy theories. They're like the poster children for global financial control.
That's true. And Wayne ties their alleged influence back to those original Nephilim bloodlines, arguing that they're essentially working as agents for these ancient powerful forces. He also points to other prominent American families like the Rockefellers, the Morgans, the Carnegies, all as part of this interconnected financial network.
Okay, it's interesting how he's kind of weaving together all these historical figures and families into this one grand narrative. But again, I have to ask, where's the proof? Does he offer any concrete evidence to support these claims?
Well, it gets a little murky there. He relies a lot on historical connections and patterns of influence. But there's not a ton of hard evidence to back up his claims.
It's more about connecting the dots and seeing a pattern that may or may not actually exist.
Exactly. He's asking viewers to trust his interpretation of events, to see the connections that he sees.
Okay, let's say for a second that we do entertain this theory. What's the end game? What are they trying to achieve?
He believes they're working to usher in a new world order. It's basically like a dystopian future where individual freedom is crushed under the weight of this this global elite.
And he ties it all back to those biblical prophecies about the end times.
Exactly. The end times, the rise of the Antichrist, all of that.
This is getting pretty heavy, like a blend of conspiracy theory and apocalyptic prophecy all rolled into one.
It definitely is. And it's really important to remember that these are just theories, not necessarily facts.
Right, of course. But even as a theory, it's pretty unsettling. I mean, if these groups are as powerful and influential as he claims, how can we resist them?
Well, Wayne does address that. He says that knowledge is power, that by understanding their tactics, their symbolism, the historical context of this whole conspiracy, we can become more discerning, more critical thinkers, and ultimately less susceptible to their manipulation.
So it's all about educating ourselves and, becoming aware of the pattern.
Exactly. He encourages viewers to question everything, to look for hidden agendas, to do their own research. And he also talks about the importance of supporting alternative media outlets and sources of information that challenge the mainstream narrative.
Okay, so it's like a battle for information. Like the first step to resisting is to break free from this mental control that he believes they've established.
That's a good way to put it. He is advocating for a kind of intellectual rebellion, urging people to think for themselves and question the narratives that they're being fed.
That's a message that resonates with me, even if I'm not totally convinced by all of his claims. It's always good to be a critical thinker and be aware of, the potential for manipulation, especially these days.
I agree. And that's something we can all do, regardless of our beliefs about, Nephilim or secret societies or any of that.
Speaking of beliefs, he also talks about the Book of Enoch, which isn't part of the traditional Bible, but it plays a pretty big role in his theory. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Sure. The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish text that basically expands on the story of the Nephilim and their influence on the world. And, most Christian denominations don't consider it to be canonical, but it has been very influential in some esoteric and mystical traditions.
So it's like a lost chapter in the story of the Nephilim.
Exactly. And Wayne uses a lot of the descriptions in the Book of Enoch about fallen angels, giants, and the corruption of humanity to support his claims. He sees it as this key piece of evidence that's been suppressed because it reveals too much about, the true nature of the world.
It's fascinating how he uses all these different sources to create this really intricate, tapestry of conspiracy, biblical passages, ancient myths, historical events, esoteric texts. It's like he's constructing his own mythology.
He's got a real knack for storytelling, that's for sure, and for making these connections that most people probably wouldn't even think about. But again, it's important to remember that these are just interpretations, not necessarily objective truths.
Right. But even if we take his claims with a grain of salt, I think there are some valuable takeaways here. The idea that, powerful forces might be manipulating events for their own benefit, that's something that's been happening throughout history, right?
Right.
Regardless of whether we believe in Nephilim or secret societies or anything like that.
That's a really good point. It's definitely a cautionary tale that encourages us to be aware of the potential for corruption and the abuse of power, no matter who's in charge.
So even if we don't buy into the whole, Nephilim conspiracy, there's value in examining these ideas and using them to think critically about the world.
I think so. It's all about asking questions, challenging assumptions, being willing to think outside the box a little bit.
It's about being vigilant and not being afraid to, dig deeper, even when the truth might be unsettling.
And sometimes it's about recognizing that things aren't always what they seem.
Well said. So where do we go from here? What's the final layer of this deep dive?
Well, Wayne finishes by offering his perspective on how to resist this whole alleged conspiracy and, what we can do to prepare for the future. It's a mix of practical advice and spiritual guidance, all geared toward empowering individuals to take control of their own lives.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear his take on all of that. So we've gone pretty deep into this this theory about, the biblical giants and secret societies and all these powerful figures pulling the strings behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It really is. And I'm kind of curious, what does Gary Wayne say we should actually do about all this?
Well, he's actually pretty positive about it all. He doesn't just leave us with this feeling of doom and gloom. He really focuses on empowerment and encourages people to, take action.
Okay, that's good to hear, because I was starting to feel a little, helpless. So what does he actually recommend we do?
Well, he talks a lot about, awareness, critical thinking, and independent research. He really wants people to, break free from what he sees as mental conditioning and to really question everything they see and hear.
Yeah, like take back our agency and not just blindly accept, all the narratives that we're being fed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he also talks about the importance of supporting alternative media outlets and sources of information. He believes that the mainstream media is pretty much controlled by these powerful forces.
Yeah.
So, we need to seek out information from independent sources that aren't afraid to challenge the status quo.
That makes sense. Especially nowadays, it's so easy to get caught up in those like echo chambers and filter bubbles.
Right. And he also stresses the importance of connecting with like-minded individuals. He believes that community and collective action are like essential for resisting this alleged conspiracy.
Yeah, strength in numbers, right?
Exactly. By joining forces with other people who share our concerns, we can support each other, we can share information, and we can work together to actually create positive change.
It's a good reminder that, we're not alone in all of this. Even if this whole Nephilim conspiracy is, a bit out there, I think his advice about like critical thinking and, media literacy and community building, that's all really relevant for anyone who's just trying to like navigate the world today.
Oh, I completely agree. Those are really valuable skills, no matter what you believe in. He also talks about the importance of, personal growth and spiritual development. He sees this as a time of like great upheaval and transformation, and he believes that it's really crucial for individuals to kind of strengthen their inner resilience and connect with a higher purpose.
So it's about like finding meaning and strength within ourselves, no matter what's going on in the world around us.
Exactly. Yeah. And he believes that, by cultivating inner peace and connecting with a higher power, we can actually become more resistant to, fear and manipulation.
That's a really powerful message, and I think it kind of speaks to what a lot of people are searching for these days. Even if we don't buy into this whole Nephilim conspiracy thing, there's something really inspiring about the idea of like taking control of our lives, questioning the narratives that we're given, and just like finding strength within ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that's ultimately what, Gary Wayne is trying to do with this video. It's not just about exposing this, conspiracy. It's about empowering people to wake up, to think critically, and to become, active participants in shaping their own destiny.
Yeah, it's like a call to action, a challenge to question everything, and a reminder that we actually have a lot more power than we realize.
Exactly. And even if we don't agree with, every single one of his conclusions, I still think there's a lot of value in, engaging with these ideas and using them as a starting point for our own critical thinking and personal growth.
Well said. I think this has been a really fascinating deep dive into this very unique theory. What are your final thoughts on all of this?
I think it's a good reminder that, reality is often stranger than fiction. And even if we, dismiss some of these claims as outlandish or whatever, they can still make us think. They can make us question our assumptions, explore different perspectives, and ultimately become more and more discerning and more informed individuals.
I couldn't agree more. So to our listeners out there, keep exploring this topic. Do your own research, form your own conclusions, whether you end up, embracing this theory or rejecting it completely. The important thing is to, keep an open mind, think critically, and never stop questioning the world around you.
And remember, the truth is out there.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Genesis 6 conspiracy. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.